regulations, any property could be deemed to be a HMO. So,
how many size or something?
It depends on the local authority's jurisdiction. So the only sure way, Fred, to know if you're buying a new property you suspect that it could come under HMO license is to get the environmental health officer out to have a look first, before you buy. Okay? Explain your intentions to the officer, and then they will tell you whether, yes, you can do shared housing and what spec you'd have to put in for that, or whether it can be full license status under HHSRS. They will tell you. And the problem with it is, although there's a guidelines throughout UK, each authority interprets that differently. Okay, so on the basis, a HMO is a house of multiple occupation, but there's lots of people in it, so it's higher risk compared to a normal buy-to-let, maybe family rental, where there's less risk. So we have to put more safety into the HMO. So there's more capital, yeah? Alarm systems, what's called L2 systems today, they're link systems. I just explained that briefly now I've mentioned it. In the old rules, each floor, if there was 3 flats in a building, for instance, each of those flats would have to have an alarm in, which was fine, but if a fire took place on the bottom flat, ground floor, and the top couldn't hear it, they're dead, worst case, yeah? So there were a few strategies. So what government said was, let's have link systems, so that all parts of the building are linked. So if there's a fire in any part, the alarms go off through the whole building. You know, simple change in the rule, but cost me a lot of money in my buildings because we had to totally rewire the buildings. And you can't just trunk it for fire alarms. It has to be embedded. Okay, so it has to be chased in, plastered, and it can, when you're doing a building up first time and you know, fine, it's not such big a cost, but when you've got to go back and change after, it can be a bit of a pain.
You can take radios?
Sorry?
There are fire alarms with radio, so you don't need on this fire.
No, they've got to be hardwired, because if you've got wireless alarms and the system is faulty or the batteries go down, you're stuffed again. They have to be linked and hardwired. There's definite rules. Okay, now, a little bit of a tip for you. Do you think these rules are going to tighten up even more?
Yes.
Absolutely. So when you're doing up buildings today, do them up to the high spec anyway. If you're rewiring a building for electrics, why don't you just run the alarm wires through while the boards are up? Very little cost you. They're there in place then, aren't they? Is that making sense? Yeah. That's exactly what we do, okay? I've seen the property ladder and programs like that, where individuals who haven't learned project management properly try to manage the refurb, and in today's market get it wrong. They're actually losing money. In a rising market, they could get away with making mistakes, couldn't they? Not today. Okay, I've seen instances, come back to you in just a moment, Stefan, where basically you've got a situation where the plumber comes out to run the pipework, the first fix. Boards go back down. You know, 2 days later, the sparky's out there lifting the same boards up to run the electrics. Boards go back down. And that, yeah, exactly. Okay, and then another couple of days later, you've got the alarm system going in. Boards up, back down. How stupid. They forget to order double glazing at the start of the development, and the whole thing's, you know, on stop until 3 weeks' time when the windows turn up. All that kind of stuff. Do you think it's important to have project management right and slick? Because all the time that you're fixing that building up, especially with HMOs, you've still got to pay the mortgage, haven't you? And there's no income coming in. So the quicker that's done, the better. So systems are what it's all about here. And where did I learn first and second fix? Where do you think? No? Look, turn your eyes to the board there. See that second heading? Distressed property and repossessions. That's where I learnt it. Okay, 3 days in. I know how to spot wall tie failure. I know how to spot wet rot and dry rot. I know what problems tree roots can cause in trees. I know how to spot any defect in a property, and I know how to put that right, and I know the systems to put that right. Is that important?
Yeah.
Of course it is.
If this health officer comes to check, is it binding? Does he give you a piece of paper that you pay? Because
Here's a good question. If the housing officer comes to check, do you think what he says is legally binding? What do you think?
Yes.
Who thinks no? Bang, bang, smack your bottoms. It's absolutely law. There's a prison sentence if you don't, worst case. They've got very strong powers, the ETOs. ETO stands for, write it down, Environmental Health Officer in Housing. If you don't comply with the ETO, it's uh-oh, I can tell you.
I thought it's the other way around, but he says it's okay, and later on somebody else comes in and says it's not. You know?
What do you mean somebody else?
Well, you ask this officer, and when you buy the house,
When you buy the house and you ask him,
no, after,
and he puts it in writing,
before you ask him,
yes,
you buy it, and then maybe he's got another job or another person, he's on vacation,
yes,
comes out, and he has a different
another
opinion.
officer
Another officer.
has got a different opinion.
Yeah, and I thought, is it binding? If
Have you got the first one in writing?
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, but he gives you. You can say, please give me that in writing.
What do you think? Are you going to get it all in writing?
Everything you do.
Absolutely. What did I say to you earlier on? Paper trail to everything you do. Even if he refuses to do that, you send the email back to him. Thank you for your visit today and suggesting the following. And he'll acknowledge that back. That gains the right. But you, more than that, you shouldn't be operating a business unless they've written those recommendations down for you. Sometimes they'll charge. Is it worth it?
Yes.
Oh yeah, it's worth paying a 100 fee or whatever it might be for the spec list and their jurisdiction. All right. So let's move on here to looking at if it does not fit your strategy, look elsewhere. Okay. Now, for me, my definite strategies work extremely well, and I love nurses. Okay, just a reminder, and for the various reasons that I've said. Let's have a look here at some tick boxes. These are tangible approaches, okay, nice big bold letters. The more ticks we can put here, I'll give you time to copy this down in your notes. The more of these points we can satisfy when we're looking at property, the safer that property becomes to buy, okay? It's a better bet, if you like. We're going to put some maths to this tomorrow, but we'll look at a whole range of what to look for and what not to look for, okay? Because we give you the upside and the downside here on deals. Has it got a garage or off-street parking? Well, there's no need for me to say anymore. I know which I prefer, a property with parking. Roof terrace or external access. If we're buying a flat here in London, it's far nicer to have, okay, some French doors leading out onto even a small raised veranda, isn't it? Better feel to the property. That's the kind of thing we're looking for. Looking for the deals which will satisfy our customers. Surroundings are clean and open. The property can be smelly and chopped to bits. Brilliant. But we don't want the environment in the same way, do we, as Bronxy? We want, you know, a nice area with a rough property sitting there, with the words on it, please buy me and fix me up and make me look like the others. That's what the property's going to be telling you in your mind. Double bedroom, minimum square sizes here, 100 square feet. This is housing law. I mean, that's actually quite small. So do look about how you can change layouts of property, how you can maximize returns. A separate toilet is always a benefit. Is that a spelling mistake? You right? You happy with me?
Yeah, sorry.
Not going to tell me off?
No, it's
Good, okay. Separate toilet.
So sorry,
Now-
when you say separate toilet, you try to find a separate toilet for how many?
Right, as I'm going to expand on it now. For every fourth person in the building, so one toilet per three, we look at another toilet, and we look at it separate to the main bathroom. So if your toilet's in the bathroom, it's not as good as having it elsewhere. Okay, so what I typically do in my houses, especially with the buy-to-lets, is look on the first floor and see is there a bedroom there that's got room to get a wet room in it. And that would be a toilet, half-moon basin, and a shower, and it'll all be tiled out. I only want 1.2 by 1.5 metres to get that in. It's really governed by the waste pipe. You know, you've got the 4-inch waste. Where am I going to run that? I would never, ever, ever, unless I really have to, use macerator units. Because what are you doing then? You're complicating the whole thing. And do they go wrong?
Yes.
What do tenants shove down toilets? All sorts. And the blades in the unit will be shot to bits. You know, no, I've heard nightmares with those kind of things. Keep it simple and make sure you can get, okay, the 4-inch waste, which is what you need. Even if it has to be above floor and boxed in next to skirting, away then from that particular separate toilet. Is that okay, Arthur?
Yeah.
Okay, it'll add value to your asset there. The last point then is very, very important as well. What we call the loved one rule, well lit and secure. When you're looking in your new areas, go back there in the early hours of the morning, because that's when the drugs and prostitution and gang warfare is going to be, if it is going to be there. Is that making sense? Can be okay in the day, can't it? Because we are buying in marginal areas which are up and coming. We want to make sure we haven't got it wrong when we're going down and out. And by returning in the early hours of the morning, we can judge again whether we'd like to live there. And if the answer is no, or you wouldn't let your loved one walk through there, stay away. Simple rule of thumb. Let's have a look at some more here. There's a whole other list. Well cared for area but undeveloped property. Expanding on what we looked at just now. We look for townhouses which are bright and light with high ceilings, not the opposite. We look for a decent outlook from the house. This is all profiled in the type of environment that we prefer as investors, which is safer. A practical layout or something we can change fairly straightforwardly. A lot of the terraces I buy, you walk in the house and you can see the stairs in front of you, and then you've got the best room on the right, which was only used for the grand occasions, with the best china in the cupboards. And then you've got the room that they live in with the fire. Both quite small rooms. Kitchen on the lean-to out the back, with a bathroom off that, and a couple of bedrooms upstairs. Typical small, cheap terrace. How can we add value on changing that layout without too much cost? Well, basically, we knock through the 2 rooms into one, with a 2.5 metre opening. Sometimes needs an RSJ in there. That's opened out and brought light in from both ends of the room. We then, a rolled steel joist, a steel girder, yeah? So then we're in a situation where we make that a kitchen, diner, lounge. That whole area becomes kitchen at the back end, because all we've had to do is run the waste around the corner from where the kitchen used to be. Where the kitchen was then in the lean-to, that becomes utility plus grand bathroom with a toilet on the side. Is that making sense? Because the plumbing is already there, isn't it? Very straightforward. If we come back into what used to be the 2 rooms, which is now the kitchen, diner, lounge, if there's restricted space there for the kitchen, we'll even run the 1,000 mil units into the lounge part, just the other side of where we knocked through. Is that making sense? So it gives us that covered space. So we can very quickly maximize the layout and add value to a property like that with very little cost pro rata. Really does raise the feel and the value and the want for rental of a property like that. Okay, there's various other things we can do, but that's the most common that I've come across. So, first-time buyer, put a couple of stars by this, because what we're targeting here on these general points is the type of property in any area that the first-time buyer would buy. Because if we're going for the bullseye, the middle of the market, is that safer for us? Rather than buying the posh stuff or the very cheap stuff. We're going for first-time buyer type of property. And that's a good indicator for us. We'll remember that when we come into lease options tomorrow. Where I'll be referring back to that point and really compounding why I said it was so important today. We've got then the 10-minute rules here for local facilities and transport links. Can we get to a tube station? Can we get to a bus station? Can we get to a train station within 10 minutes walking distance from the property? Do you think that's important?
Yes.
It's vital, isn't it? If we're driving, okay, if the family you're selling to or rented to is going to be car owners and drivers, the 10-minute rule still applies, but can we get to a main road intersection within 10 minutes from the property? Okay, so again with the local facilities, laundrette, shops, 10 minutes away in either case. That stops you buying property at the top end of the Welsh Valleys. Stops you buying property in the far reaches and other regions of Scotland. Because if you do that, you're risking yourself, aren't you? You need to stay near the population centres under the 10-minute rule, because there's going to be more demand for your properties in that way. Okay, so it's quite often what we call, where we buy, is a satellite area to the main city centre. Okay, it's within that 10-minute commuter belt of the main resources there in the city itself. Again, it's common sense, really. Let's have a look at things we don't like. Okay, you're going to like this slide. Things we don't like. Residential in a commercial area. Why? Because mixed use doesn't work for the mortgage lender or the insurers. They don't like it. Okay? Without the obvious noise and dust and nuisance that may occur. Also, low lying. This is a biggie. Housing Act 2004. Let's give you perhaps one of the main directives that's affecting us now as investors. Is Technical Advice Note 15. Yes, you'll have to learn them all, I'm afraid. Okay, but number 15 says this. If a property has flooded in the past, back from this date, once within 1,000 years, this is a new law, then it's high risk for floodplain. TAN 15 said it's high risk. The old rule before this came in was that if the property had flooded once within 100 years back, it was high risk. So as a result of the tightening up now of the Environment Agency, with this rule TAN 15, it's brought huge parts of UK into the floodplain criteria. You don't want to be buying in a floodplain. Do you think we've got research sites that can prevent us doing this? Yeah. It's the Environment Agency site, which is in the back of your list on page 100. Okay? And we'll refer, don't turn to it now, we'll have a look at that page in a minute, because not only that, we're going to look at some others as well for research in just a minute. Environmental Agency. Okay, and we'll come back to it in a minute, because we've got a website to check that. And other environmental impact. Landfill sites, is that important to know? Yeah. Is it important to know where the coal mine entries are and the coal mines themselves? All affects us, doesn't it? So we need to do the research prior to. Open rear access, again a no, security issues. Lenders don't like it. Add in the cost of a wall or fence to actually make the back end of the property secure. The environmental issues that I mentioned there. School next door, is that good or bad? Bad. Generally bad, isn't it? The movement, the noise, okay? Would you buy next to a pub? No. I wouldn't. Okay, no. For obvious reasons. So, you know, look through investors' eyes here. Listed or requiring planning consents and structural problems, a big one. This is major in a lot of the property that I look at. Case in point, in some of the areas I buy, if the terrace houses are on a sloping row, you know, the bottom 3 terraces have normally gone a bit because of the weight of the others on the hill, so I wouldn't buy the bottom end of a terrace row. It's just a rule of mine. But even with the others, sometimes you're looking at them, because a lot of them have subsidence, and you're thinking, you know, have I been drinking? That door's not quite square with the door frame, do you know what I mean? And it's a bit stiff to open, you get in there and you can feel the floor running. You know, whoa. Does that make sense? No. Don't ignore what you're feeling, what you can see. You look in there and the stairs ain't quite straight and aligned. The internal wall sunk a bit. Because some of these old stone properties were built just on subsoil, weren't they? And they sink and they move and they need underpinning. And that's expensive and it's not for you at this stage. Let's have a look at some other no-nos. And we'll break for a coffee in just a minute. Noise nuisance. Small cramped rooms. Dirty rundown areas. All self-evident here. A major road too close or coming too close. And we'll determine how we see what's coming straight after coffee. Flats above the chip shop. That's that mixed use again popping up. High crime rates. Have we got websites to check these? Absolutely. Okay. Now, once you've copied that down, if you can turn to page 100 in the workbook, and we'll just highlight the websites that we need to be aware of here when we're looking at location. And there's a whole list here, okay? Now, this is where the homework comes in when we start picking these out. So I'll just wait for you all to finish writing, and I'll actually highlight the ones that are the most important there out of the workbook itself. Now then, if you look into where it says section 2 in the workbook.
So what page is that? 100.
Oh, sorry, page 100. The same, they're all on the same page there as before. Okay, we've got upmystreet.co.uk. Can you see it about halfway down the page there? Yeah. Okay, put a little mark by that one. That's for crime rate stats, 10-minute rule. Okay, so that's crime rates, 10-minute rule, and property values. That's all on upmystreet.co.uk. Crime rate, okay, would be the biggest single factor that lenders don't like. Also on there, which is handy, is school performances. Do you think, you know, that Mr. and Mrs. want to know whether it's a good school for Johnny and Jane, whether they're going to pass their exams? Yeah. Is there any parents here like me? Have we got kids? Yeah, it matters to us, doesn't it? So, upmystreet.co.uk links into the Ofsted site, which gives us school performance stats as well. So it's one of the most used sites by myself here for research. We go down to the next one, which is hmrc.gov.uk/SO/disadvantage.htm. This is a link into the Stamp Office section on Her Majesty's Revenue Commission, okay, the tax website. Used to be in revenue.gov.uk, but they've changed the branding now to Her Majesty's Revenue Commission. It costs us millions. It's a stamp duty exemption here now. Now, this is handy for targeting. That's why I've actually put it in here, in this part of the list, because if we go back to thinking about target areas, we want to determine what is an up-and-coming area, don't we? Yes or no?
Yes.
Well, one of the ideal target factors for us is to find out where these exempt areas are in UK. There's over 2,000 regions of UK through this link. Because if government says it's disadvantaged or severely disadvantaged, what's likely to happen to property values in that area? They go up quicker than the norm because of two main factors. One, regeneration programs that government put in place. Manchester's a classic example. Okay? Or number two, investors' grants. Okay? Raising bottom-up GDP like they do in Belfast. Okay? In Northern Ireland. So to look at the target of stamp duty exemption is a big tick for us. Gives us a good starting position to see whether we can get the type of yields that we want in an area that may well be up and coming, because if it's deemed as disadvantaged or severely disadvantaged, government is telling us that they think it's under and it's going to come up. Okay? The other sites we've got here, net house prices. This is a site for property values, which is a good guide because it links into the land registry site. House Pals again, another good site for values. Homelet, landlord's insurance. Okay, Homelet is landlord's insurance. And I'll just go down through the list here quickly. Home Track, property searches. Okay, Rightmove, we've actually had it once already, again, for property sourcing and for rent comparables. Okay, so we'll leave the other ones that's in the list until a little bit later on. We're going to use that information as well. Any questions on that? Yep.
Yes. Just
Fred?
before you move on, you did mention flats.
Council flats,
Yeah.
love them.
Where most of them are just.
Oh, the big Bronxy buildings,
Yeah.
the huge, oh, I stay away from them.
Okay, but then where they don't have, some of them don't have high-rise properties, but they are overcrowded. They could be noisy.
Stay away, because
Young adults.
noise,
yeah.
problems, don't want to buy into problems. You'll find it very difficult to get a lender to lend onto a building that you're buying that's got more than 6 floors. So there's multi-units, there's crowded areas. That's the real bottom end of the market, yeah? Well, leave that be and consider social housing instead. Okay, which we're going to come on to later on. I certainly wouldn't bring that into this criteria. I would stay away because it's going to cause you problems, isn't it?
But people tend to have the feeling that because of the fact that there are a lot of people there in the
Yeah.
vicinity, school is just a stone throw away.
Yeah.
There's a network of transportation, train, buses.
However, okay, it satisfies the first part, doesn't it? But it flouts it here.
Okay.
Because it's cramped, it's small, there's noise, too many units in one place, absolute no.
Okay.
Okay.
At the other end of it, I visited a friend about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
He lives in Watford.
Yes,
I may not have to disclose the area.
Yes.
But the point is this. We have to drive down the distance to meet him.
Yes.
He did say that public transport, the bus, is once in 1 hour.
yeah, well, 1 in 1 hour, you tell me what you think about that if you had to live there.
To me, it's nonsense.
Right, then we don't buy there.
But it looks a highly sophisticated area with rich people living there. And
Well, if there's highly sophisticated and rich people living there, that's no good for us either.
that's right.
Okay, we're looking for a specific type of market, yeah, Fred? I know you missed this morning, so you missed part of what we're talking about. But we're actually staking a place in the market which is an investor place.
That's right.
Okay, now, we're not going for the top end, as we said this morning. We're not going for the bottom end. We're going for the middle bit. All right, and if you bear that in mind, when we come on to the examples, it'll make it plain as to the type of properties that we prefer. And it wouldn't be either of the type that we've just been suggested there for that strategy.
Thank you.
Okay, no problem, Fred. Okay, so coming back to the other problems here on crime rate stats. Upmystreet.co.uk, the site I mentioned just now, the lenders use that a lot. Okay, and to that end then, you know, we've got to look through their eyes at our deal, haven't we? And if the insurance is too high, or the mortgage availability is low, we stay away. Couple of, just to finish off, a couple of points here of consideration is, when you do get to look at the property itself, to double check you've got your homework right, get an insurance proposal for buildings insurance on that property before you buy it. Okay, this is a local ground research now, an insurance proposal for the building itself. Now compare that with the site that we just mentioned, the landlord insurer site of homelet.co.uk. Because what Homelet have got on their site, which is very handy for us as investors, is all the postcodes of UK listed. And next to that, they got the amount of pounds you expect to pay per 1,000 of purchase price for buildings insurance in that area. There's our template, our guide. Compare your local quotation with that guide.
So which
Okay?
site is it?
Homelet, HOMELET.co.uk. It's in the 100 lister. Okay? Now, coming down to the thoughts on this, if the local quote is far higher than the Homelet standard benchmark, what's that telling us? What's the 3 things that could be wrong with that property that we've missed?
Crime.
It could be crime is 1,
Structure.
structure is 2, and the 3rd is? No, not noise. They're not worried about that.
Wrong insurance.
We have, no,
Flooding.
flooding, thank you, okay? It's TAN 15. Those are the big 3. Structure, okay, being more obvious to see here. Flooding, being not obvious at all. Crime should be obvious, but we don't know. We're going to check on to upmystreet.co.uk, because if the lenders see that it's like that, it matters to us as investors. And the areas, Fred, that you're talking about would flag up some of those on the bottom end of flouting those rules, so we wouldn't buy there. Okay, they'd be seen as a crime rate too high, I would suspect. Okay, so we're coming back now to a couple of other thoughts as well. Now, there is a provision, and this is the final point in this section, from the Land Registry. Now, the Land Registry does print every quarter a publication, which is an indication of what properties have achieved in their last quarter on sale prices. Would that be handy to have? Okay, well, it's free to us investors. We just got to ask. Okay, and it's called the Residential Property Price Report. Residential Property Price Report. And when you're starting off like most of you are here now, it's important to get hold of that. And all you need to do is go on to the site there, which is Land Reg, which is in your list, the Land Registry site, and actually send them an email on the contact page and ask for, can you please send us a copy of the Residential Property Price Report for UK? It covers all of UK. So when you've got your target areas and you're looking at your comparable values, you know, fact is what matters here in this business, isn't it?